Hello everyone, welcome to the first video in the series I'll be creating about React Native and the ASP.01 module where we will be developing exciting IoT projects. And the goal of this video is to set up the code base we need to start developing the applications. We will install from scratch the main tools we need, such as Node.js, Git, VS Code, Android Studio, and for styling, we will use a CSS framework for React Native called NativeWind, which is based on the popular Tailwind CSS framework. I've created a small list of tools we will need to set up the base template. I'll leave it in the comment as well. Let's start by installing Node.js, but we will use the Node version managed NVM, which will allow us to install and switch to any Node.js version we want. Search for it, type in NVM Windows to get the most accurate result. Look for the one that says Corey Butler. Let's head over to that repository. Further down, you'll find the download button. Click on it and it will take you to the second page where you will find more options by scroll down. I'll choose the exec file nvm setup.x. Once downloaded, I run it by clicking on this share icon. From there, it's pretty straightforward. Just click on next and next. Then just check if it was installed correctly. Open a window terminal and type the command nvm space -v and press enter. Here you'll see the installed versions 1.1.12 in my case. Yours might be different. Once nvm is installed, let's install the Node.js version we want. I recommend install the current version available on the Node.js website. Let's search for Node.js and go to the site, and the time of recording this video, the current version is 22.11.0. So let's go back to the terminal and type the command nvm install 22.11.0. Once the installation finished, we can run the command nvm space list to see the list of Node.js version installed. In this case, we only see the version we just installed. Next, to set the Node.js version for our system, type the command nvm use 22.11.0. And again, to confirm that the Node.js version is correctly installed, type the command node space -v and the terminal will respond with the version. Now let's continue by installing Git. Let's search for Git for Windows and select the first link, and let's choose the 64-bit version. Click on it, and again, after download it, click on the icon to start the installations. Again, click on next. I prefer enable this option to integrate Git bash with other terminals. This is optional, of course. Click on next, next, again next, and so on. We keep moving forward by clicking next until the installation starts. Here we go. Well, that's it for Git. Now let's move to installing the next tool, the VS Code editor. Similarly, search for VS Code on the internet and the link to the official page will usually appear as the first result. Download it and wait for the download to complete and run the installer. In this case, it's similar. Just click on next, next, next until the installation finishes. Make sure to keep the checkbox at the end enabled to open the IDE right away. Once it opens, we will install the extension we'll use the most. This step is optional, of course, but they will make coding much easier. The first extension is called Color Highlight, which allows to visualize the color of our CSS styles directly from the code in the editor. Then we have Prettier Code Formatter. It's super useful for maintaining consistency and structure in our code. It even has the option to auto-format the code every time we save changes. I will show you later how to configure that. Slin is an extension that helps us identify and resolve issues in our code to ensure coding quality standards. ES7 React Redux provides a set of handy tools and snippets that make coding faster for styling, and because we'll use the NativeWind library based on Tailwind CSS, the extension Tailwind CSS IntelliSense will be very helpful if we can't recall a specific class, or if we want to see the equivalence between Tailwind classes and CSS. This is the extension we need. Lastly, I found the extension IntelliCode very interesting. It includes an AI assistant and an excellent text editor. Just make sure to install IntelliCode completion alongside IntelliCode, as it serves as the code prediction tool. And finally, we have VS Code icons, which is also a visual help for identifying most of the files in our directory. By the way, once you install this extension, you'll see a small pop-up at the top here asking you to choose the default icon extension in case you have multiple, and just click on the one we installed, and yeah, that's it. Before proceeding with the installation of Android Studio, let me show you a configuration that must be enabled by default on Windows for the emulators to work correctly. This option is called Hyper-V and should be enabled by default. In case you don't have it, maybe you will need to enable this option from the BIOS, from your board, and but normally it's enabled by default. So you'll find it by going to the control panel, then click on uninstall a program on the left side of the screen. Click on turn Windows features on or off. A list of features will appear. Here is Hyper-V. Just make sure both options are checked. In my case, it's already enabled. If it's not enabled on your system, just check the boxes and Windows will prompt to you to restart your computer. That's it. Let's continue with the Android Studio download. Search for React Native and click on Get Started to access the documentation. At the moment, there are two sets of documentation with information about Android Studio for React Native. One is available on the React Native website, and the other one is on Expo website, which has a direct link here. Let's click on it to go to Expo page. This guide shows you how to install and configure Android depending on which device you want to test and for which operative system. If you scroll down, you will find more detailed information that we will follow step by step in a moment. But for now, let's download Android Studio using the download link provided here at the top, which redirect us to the official page. Click on download, accept the terms and conditions, and the download will start automatically. Once it's complete, click to begin the installation. Let's minimize the page so we are not distracted by the background of the page. Similar to the previous app, click on next, and when it's finished, leave the box checked to launch the application. Android Studio will prompt you to install some additional tools, which will already be selected by default. All you need to do is click on next again, accept the terms, and click finish. So the installation will start, and that's it. Now let's move on the configuration needed to run emulators on Windows. Of course, Mac OS has a different setup that we might cover in another video, but for now let's focus on Windows. The first step is to set up the environment variable called Android Home and its path. So to create the environment variable, go to Start, type Control Panel and open it. And in the window, click on User Account, then click on User Account again. On the left side, you will see the options Change My Environment Variable. Click on that. We're going to add a new variable by clicking New. Enter the name of the variable, Android _home. Then in the variable value input, we need to add the path to the Android SDK file. You will find the path on your C drive. So go to C, then users, open your user folder and look for the folder name app data. Normally this folder is hidden, but you can make it visible in the view menu at the top. Check hidden items option, and here it is. We can see see now the app data folder. Let's click on it, then go to local folder, then Android, and then SDK folder. Then go to the address bar in the file explorer. Let's copy the entire path and now paste it into the variable value field. Click on OK and OK again. Now to validate that the variable is OK, let's copy this terminal command into a PowerShell console. Let's open it as administrator and paste it there the command, hit enter, and we can see the variable and the value. Let's continue. Now we need to configure the path to platform tools folder, which can be found inside the SDK folder. Let's go back to Android window, enter to the platforms tools folder, and again copy the full path from the file explorer. Let's reopen the environment variables config, but this time select the path variable and click on edit. In the new window, click on the new button and paste the path. Click OK, then OK again, close everything, and that's it for this part. Now, to ensure everything is correctly configured, we should be able to run the command provided here in the PowerShell console. So let's copy it, reopen the console, paste it, and hit enter. And here it is. We should see the platform version displayed. Great, that's all for the config part. Let's continue reviewing the documentation. Okay, here it tells us how to create an Android emulator. Let's open Android Studio, click on more options, select Virtual Device Manager. A new window will open. Click on the plus button to add a new emulator. In my case, I'm going to select the model Pixel 8 Pro. Click next. Then we need to download and install an Android version for our emulator. In my case, I'm going to download the Tiramisu version. Then just accept the terms, click on next, and wait for the download. Once it's done, click finish, and in the previous window we can proceed by clicking next. I'm not going to change anything else, so I'll just click on finish, and that's it. To run the emulator, click on play icon on the right and wait for the device to initialize. Okay, in case you got an error on the emulator, it's most likely because you need to install the redistributable version of C++ library. You can easily find this program on Google by searching by Microsoft redistributable C++ and opening the Microsoft link. Scroll down to find the version for your system and just download it. But first, make sure you don't already have it installed. You can check by going to Start, Control Panel, click on Uninstall a program and look for it in the list of installed programs. In my case, you can see that I already have it installed, so I don't need to install it again. Let's close everything and continue. Now let's create a folder on the desktop called ASP01. Go back to Visual Studio Code. Let me adjust its size a bit. Now drag the folder we just created into Visual Studio Code. Perfect. Let's make a bit more space so we can work comfortably and see the emulator as well. Now let's open a terminal from the top menu. I recommend setting Git Bash as the default console inside Visual Studio Code. You can set it as the default by clicking on the arrow icon next to the plus button, and from the list select default profile, and at the top select Git Bash. And that's all. Let's go back to the button and select a new terminal. Actually, let's close everything and reopen the terminal so you can see now Git Bash is the console by default in Visual Studio Code. Now let's return to the expo page to continue with the guide. Let me adjust. Great. Let's continue in the Start Development section. Let's go to the chapter Create a Project. Here we see that to create a project in React Native, we need to use the command npx create-expo-app at latest. Let's copy it and go to Visual Studio Code, paste it into the console and press enter. It asks if we want to proceed, type UI and press enter. For the base template name, let's use react-native-template. and press enter. Let's wait a moment while it completes. Great. Now from the project directory on the left, select the folder for the project we just created and drag it back to Visual Studio Code. This ensures we are in the root directory when we reopen the console. Let me adjust the editor a bit more. Perfect. Now to run the project in the console, let's run the command npx expo start and press enter. The application will begin executing, and at the end it shows us this app execution option via QR code or by selecting one of the options from the list. To open the app in the Android emulator, press the key A as indicated in the menu, and that's it. The application will begin installing the Expo Go framework on the emulator, and after that it will create the build to run from there. And here it is. The app is running now in the emulator. The default project contains too many files and the code that we don't need right now. The idea is to build our application from scratch step by step. Fortunately, Expo offers a command to simplify the current project into a much more basic structure. To find the command, open the package.json file. Inside the scripts object, you'll see a command named reset project. Copy it, and in the console, run npm run reset project and hit enter. Now we have a simplified base structure, although it still contains most of the files from the previous version. Let's go ahead and select each unnecessary file. For instance, from app, select the tabs folder and everything below it, and delete them until only the layout tsx file remains. Let's open that file to clean up the code we don't need. Let me adjust the console for better visibility. Now select this block of code and delete it. Let's also remove these imports. We don't need team provider, and from stack we'll keep only one route for a single screen that we'll create later. Before continue, let me show you how to configure the Prettier Code Formatter extension. Select all the code in the file, right click and choose Format Document. And a modal will appear asking you to select the default formatter. Click configure and then select Prettier Code Formatter from the list. And you see now the code is automatically formatted. Now let's open the settings in Visual Studio Code. Click on the gear icon on the left, then click on settings, expand the text editor and search for formatter. Enable the format on save checkbox. And now let's test it. Add some extra space in the code and now save changes. And you see the code is automatically formatted. Next, we'll configure the route to the default screen we'll create, which will be named index. By the way, the file name should also match the name of the screen. Select the app folder, click on the new file icon at the top and name the file as index.tsx. In this new React Native architecture, a folder-based routing structure is used. So that's why we have this folder called app. We place there all the screen files, and in the underscore layout, we defined elements related to navigation to those screens. Let's start coding our first screen. Just like in pure React.js, in React Native, we need to create a function that returns a JSX component. So for this case, we'll return a default function called index, which also will return a component. And since we're not going to have additional JavaScript code, we'll wrap it only in parentheses. We're also going to add an element called view, which will act as a container for the other React Native elements we want to render. The code predictor is telling me that we need to import this element from a library. Just make sure this element comes from the React Native library as indicated in this second line. To select it, just click or press enter. And you'll see at the top of the code, we have now our first element imported. Similar to HTML code, most of these elements have opening and closing tags. And between them goes what we're going to render, which for this case will be another element called text that also we need to import. And inside that, we will be render the text index page. As you can see in the emulator, there is an error message and the screens also looks a bit odd, but considering the change we've made, it's normal. Let me adjust the console a bit to show you that there is also an error message there. Since the change has had a big impact in the build, we're going to need to make a new one. For this, I'm going to stop the server with the keys Ctrl+C, and since I had been some issues with the latest version of Expo, I'll also close it in the emulator. Now let's restart the server with the command npx expo start, and we'll open it for Android with the key A, and now we can see that the application is running and with the change we made. Now let's install a couple of libraries that we're going to need. The first one is called Axios. We are going to use this library to make a HTTP request to the server of the ASP.01 module, and it's a bit better for handle this request, though you can also use fetch if you prefer. To handle the styles of our applications, we'll use the library called NativeWind, which is the React Native version of the popular Tailwind CSS framework. There are a series of steps to follow, so let's go to our browser and search for NativeWind, and as is often, the official page appears at the first search result. Click on this link and here we have the library officials page, where you'll find information of how it works and how to use it, etc. You'll see that React Native elements can be styled as if they were HTML elements using Tailwind CSS code. I recommend reading through the documentation for more information about the library. For now, we're interested in knowing how to install it, so let's click on React Native link. Here we have a step-by-step guide. Let's start by installing the framework and its dependencies. Let's just copy the command from this icon on the right, go to the console and paste it and press enter. Wait for it for install and then continue. This part about non-expo project is unnecessary, so we'll skip it and move on. Okay, next it says we need to create a file called tailwind.config.js, and we'll create it using this command on the left. Copy it, return to the console, paste it, press enter. So as you can see in the project on the left, the command has created the file in the root directory with this default content. Let's return to the page. As it mentioned that this file should have this content, let's copy that as well. Go back to the editor, select everything and paste to replace the previous content and save. Let's go back to the guide. Now we also need to create a file called global CSS with the content shown below. Copy the content in the same way and let's create the file manually this time. We need to create it in the root directory as well, so go to the icon at the top, click it and write the file name with its extension, press enter, paste the content you copy it and save the changes. Now let's return to the guide for step 3. It says we now need to add the following content in our Babel file, so let's copy it and go back to the editor, and as we can see we don't have a Babel file, so let's create it. Just like before, click on new file and name it as babel.config.js, press enter, paste and save the changes again. Let's continue. Now it tells us that we need to do the same for metro.config.file. By the way, just like in the Babel section, you'll see there's different content to use depending on the version of Expo installed in your project. You can check it in the package.json file. So let's go back to the code editor, find the JSON file, which is also in the root of the project. Look under the dependencies for Expo, and here it is. Next to it, you'll find the installed version, which is currently 52.0. Then from the guide, the content we'll copy is the one under the subtab Expo SDK 15. Let's go back to the editor, and since we don't have a metro file either, let's create it with the same name. metro.config.js, press enter and paste the content and save. Let's continue. Step 5 tell us to now import the global.css file into the application starting file app.js, but in our case, since we're using the new Expo architecture, we'll import it directly into the underscore layout tsx file, because from there it will be essentially be inherited by other components that are part of the route. Start the import, open quotes, and since the underscore layout file is located inside the app folder in the root, we need to indicate the actual location of the file we need. So instead of single dot, use 2 dots to indicate it's one directory above the current one. As soon as you type slash, you'll see the files in the current path. Select the one that named global.css, and let's go back to the guide and continue with the second to last step, which involves making a small adjustment in the app.json file, more exactly in the bundle property of the web object in Expo. So we just need to ensure that the bundle has the value of Metro. Let's open VS Code and go to the app.json, search for Expo web bundler, and confirm that we already have Metro as the value. So we're good. Let's return to the guide from the final step. Click on this link. We see that we just need to create this file with this content. I'll copy the name of the file, go to the project, and since it should also be in the root directory, click outside the project just in case you were previously in another folder. Click on the new file icon, paste the same name you copied and press enter. And now copy the required content for the file, return to the editor, paste it, save it, and that's it. Let's stop the server again to create a new build, as we have made changes to the project's configuration. One more, use Ctrl+C, start the server again, close Expo on the emulator as well, wait for the new build to be created, and reopen it using the A key for Android. Now to test the NativeWind in our application, let's add some styling to the component we create in the index file. Let's apply it to the view container. As you can see, we now can use class name property without errors. So let's add a background color. By the way, thanks to the extension we installed, you can see the color preview based on the class you need, along with its CSS equivalent. Let's select this green with the value of 600 and save it. And as you can see, we already applying styles just as we do in React.js application with Tailwind CSS. Let's apply a bit more styles, add some flex properties, center the content, and for the text, let's increase the fonts a bit, test different values, and as you can see, everything responds correctly. And yeah, that's it for this first video. The idea is that if you want, you can follow this guide step by step to set up the code base we need for the projects we'll be creating with ASP.01 module and Arduino. I'll also upload this code to a GitHub repository, and we'll share the link so you can download it. And yeah, that's all for this first video. I hope it's useful to you, and I'll see you in the next one where we'll start building IoT projects. Okay, bye.